Welcome to the Love Story with Lisa channel. Today, we're bringing you a brand new story. The Real and Fake Noble Daughter, main story, I Was Reborn. I came back exactly one day before the prestigious Chen family was supposed to come and take me away. The girl who had bullied me for over a decade cornered me in the orphanage bathroom and demanded I hand over the proof of my noble identity. Gu Xiaoxiao, you're ugly and dirty. You have no right to live in a wealthy family like that. You might as well hand it over to me. Bai Chun's beautiful face was filled with malice. What she called a request was nothing but outright theft. She snatched my identification documents straight from my hands. In my past life, she beat me bloody and I still refused to give them up. In the end, the commotion was brought before the orphanage director. Bai Chun received only a mild scolding. This time around, I stood there and watched my identification card get stolen. I even put on a timid, cowering act and asked her, "If I give this to you, you won't hit me anymore, right?" Bai Chun, having gotten what she wanted, stared at me in surprise. Of course. I am the noble daughter of the Chen family. From now on, you don't even have the right to speak to me. Having said that, she brushed off invisible dust from her clothes and strutted out of the bathroom. I slowly got up, curled the corner of my lips, and then couldn't hold back the laughter that echoed through the bathroom walls. Thank you, Heaven, for hearing my prayers and giving me another life. In my last life, I was bullied at the orphanage until the age of 15, when the Chen family finally came to take me home. I thought I was finally going to enjoy the family warmth I had been deprived of for so long, but instead, I met a conniving little sister, a cold and brooding older brother, and a pair of selfish parents. The reason they brought me home was simple: Chen Xian needed a new kidney. My parents didn't care whether I lived or died. When Chen Yu bullied me until I was 18, I was pushed onto the operating table while fully conscious and had my kidney removed. I died 3 months later from infection in that hospital bed. During those 3 months, I prayed to heaven countless times, "Give me another life. I will make every single person who hurt me pay dearly." Heaven listened. I was reborn. The wheels of fate have only just begun to turn. Everything can still be saved. The next morning, Bai Chun wore a pretty, clean dress and stood beside the director, looking sweet and clever. Mr. and Mrs. Chen arrived to pick up their daughter. The moment they saw Bai Chun, their eyes lit up with joy. They stepped out of the luxury car, arms outstretched toward her. Bai Chun's beautiful eyes immediately filled with tears, and she threw herself into Mrs. Chen's arms, sobbing loudly. The director sniffled and smiled warmly nearby. Journalists swarmed around them, each racing to be the first to break the news of the Chen family's emotional reunion. I had hidden myself up on the rooftop and watched this entire performance through the window with great amusement. As Mrs. Chen took Bai Chun's hand and helped her into the luxury car, I smiled and waved silently, "Farewell. I wish you smooth sailing, and a smooth organ donation." After Bai Chun left, life at the orphanage grew peaceful. The Chen family sent no news either. That was actually a good thing. It meant Bai Chun's kidney had successfully matched with Chen Xian, and the Chens had not yet grown suspicious of her true identity. Because I had willingly surrendered my identity documents, the director's attitude toward me improved considerably. She even gave me a sum of money, praising me for my excellent exam results and bringing honor to the orphanage. I cried tears of gratitude to her face, and laughed quietly behind her back. The day before Bai Chun left, the director had commented that I was only good at studying, but that my mind was otherwise hopelessly dull. I took that money and used it to pay tuition for a key high school, enrolling in the experimental class. This high school had an excellent academic reputation. The students primarily pursued the university entrance path, and because of that, even the non-wealthy experimental class students followed the rules. No one looked down on an orphan like me. During the first week of school, the homeroom teacher noticed my natural science scores weren't high enough and arranged for me to sit next to a top student in mathematics. My new seatmate's name was Zhang Sheng, tall, handsome, refined, and the sole heir of the prestigious Zhang family. More importantly, he was the fiancé the Chen family had chosen for their noble daughter, Gu Xiaoxiao. I heard you get along very well with Zhang Sheng. The arts committee member leaned over my desk and asked with a giggle. Can you get me his WeChat? Zhang Sheng and I only exchange a few pleasantries. We're not close friends, I answered, straightening my notes. But if you need it, I could try to help. No, I was just saying it casually. The arts committee member hurriedly stood when she saw Zhang Sheng approaching, leaving a bottle of yogurt on my desk before fleeing. Zhang Sheng sat down and casually picked up my notes to tidy them. His knuckles were clearly defined, and his fingers grazed mine. I pulled my hand back as if I had touched an electric wire. Zhang Sheng was briefly startled. His expression quickly returned to normal. He simply pointed out a small error in my notes. My grades when I enrolled weren't exceptional. Fortunately, my mind wasn't completely dull either. By the middle of the semester, I had climbed to second place in the year, right behind Zhang Sheng. After my first high-scoring exam, Zhang Sheng asked me out to celebrate, to a cafe downtown. My clothes, provided by the orphanage, were old and out of style, so I wore my school uniform. When Zhang Sheng saw me, he started to say something but stopped himself. I said plainly, I'm an orphan. I don't have money to buy clothes. From then on, every time Zhang Sheng invited me out, he also wore his school uniform. At the end of the first semester, news arrived from the Chen family. Bai Chun was dead. Rumor had it she died by jumping from a building after a depressive episode. At her funeral, Chen Xian, a frail young man who had been bedridden for years, carried his sister's coffin with surprising vigor, earning praise from the media for his brotherly devotion. In truth, he was simply grateful for the kidney Bai Chun had given him. The director of the orphanage wept the most. I understood why. Bai Chun was the director's own daughter. The woman had let greed turn her own child into an orphan. When she arranged for her daughter to infiltrate the Chen household, she surely never imagined Bai Chun would be treated as a mobile organ donor. The day after the news broke, Zhang Sheng invited me out. I deliberately wore a wine-red dress I had bought with scholarship money. It made my beauty all the more striking. When Zhang Sheng saw me, he was speechless for a long moment. Finally, his ears turned red and he asked why I was dressed so beautifully. I completed the last answer on a practice exam with one decisive stroke. Raised my head, and smiled. Because today is my birthday, Zhang Sheng's eyes went wide. He immediately stood up and walked across to the bakery opposite. 15 minutes later, an 8-inch cake appeared in front of me. Zhang Sheng rolled up his sleeve and helped me light the candles. I closed my eyes and made a wish. On a street not far away, the director carried an urn of Bai Chun's ashes, scattering paper money along the roadside. One piece of paper money caught the autumn wind and floated to my feet. I pressed it down under my shoe. Bai Chun, thank you. Your life is the best birthday gift I have ever received. 2 months after Bai Chun's death, the newly transplanted kidney Chen Xian had received was severely rejected. Emergency measures failed. He died. Bai Chun was not Chen Xian's biological sister, after all. Their compatibility was limited. The kidney could never fully accept him. I could have predicted it. And so could Mr. and Mrs. Chen. Despite their grief, they decided to run a DNA test on Bai Chun's remains one more time. As expected, her false identity was exposed. With the Chen family's resources, tracing Bai Chun's true origins was no difficult task. The director's scheme was swiftly uncovered. Mr. and Mrs. Chen took out their grief over their son on the director's head. After the summer holiday ended, the former director of the orphanage mysteriously disappeared. A new director arrived and took over. The Chen family now had only one child left, Chen Yu. To ensure the safety of their heir, they began searching once again for their missing noble daughter. This time, they found me. Together, we performed a grand reunion scene for the media, successfully propping up the Chen family's stock price, which had plummeted after Chen Xian's death. Life at the Chen family was not smooth sailing. Because I had arrived after Chen Xian's death, the question of who would be the Chen family's heir became unsettled. On my very first day there, Chen Yu threw all of my luggage down to the basement, blocked my bedroom door, and called me a lowly mongrel who crawled out of some filthy place. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, who indulged their little daughter, simply turned a blind eye. They had a basement room converted into my bedroom. Chen Yu thought she had won completely and grew even more arrogant and brash. On the first day of school, I deliberately sat in the wrong seat and ate from Chen Yu's silverware at lunch. Chen Yu was predictably furious. She stomped over and slapped me hard, then splashed milk all over my school uniform. I touched my clothes, then immediately picked up a small knife and slashed Chen Yu's face. She had no time to dodge. A deep cut appeared on her cheek. Before she could scream, I gave her an additional slap that sealed her mouth shut. Looking at the arrogant, self-satisfied girl who had tormented me all through my last life, now crouched in fear at my feet, my heart felt deeply at peace. I bent down, smiled, and whispered to Chen Yu, "Chen Xian is dead. I know you also had a hand in that. So you had better tuck your tail between your legs from now on." A flash of terror crossed Chen Yu's eyes as the secret she was hiding was seen through. Then she quickly hid it again. Mrs. Chen rushed to the scene. Seeing Chen Yu's bleeding face, she started to scold me, but the moment she spotted my clothes, she went silent. I was wearing Chen Xian's old school uniform, which I had found in the basement. Chen Xian had been just as academically excellent as I was. Before falling ill, he could be called my senior. "Xiao Xiao, why are you wearing your brother's uniform?" Mrs. Chen frowned. I pretended to be frightened and glanced at Chen Yu, then lowered my head and hesitated. Little sister accidentally spilled milk on my clothes, so I borrowed big brother's uniform to wear. Mrs. Chen immediately turned and scolded Chen Yu, not even sparing a glance for Chen Yu's wound, which was dripping blood. I glanced back at Chen Yu, then slipped on my backpack and walked out. In my last life, Mrs. Chen had valued sons over daughters. She had even negotiated with Chen Xian that if my kidney wasn't a match, they would sacrifice Chen Yu for a second attempt. In this life, Chen Xian was already dead. But Chen Yu was still alive, which meant she had known she was going to be sacrificed and had found a way out. Now I had used Chen Xian's old school uniform to wake up the memory in Chen Yu. In her mother's eyes, even a dead son's school uniform mattered more than her own injury. When I arrived at school, Zhang Xing noticed my oversized, old-fashioned uniform and frowned. "Gu Xiao Xiao, whose clothes are you wearing?" I took off the too large uniform and said casually, Chen Xians. My own clothes were ruined by Chen Yu. Since both were from noble families, Zhang Xing naturally knew I had been formally recognized by the Chens. He stayed silent for a moment, then removed his own school jacket and draped it over my shoulders, the scent of sandalwood wrapped around me. I looked down. Today, under my school uniform, I was wearing only a short-sleeved white top. Lifting my arm would expose everything. Thank you, I told him sincerely. Zhang Xing's ears flushed red. He looked away, but still continued, I'll buy you new clothes. I still have a set that's new. I smiled and shook my head, then reached out and patted his hand resting on the desk. No need. Tomorrow I'm transferring to the Foreign Languages High School. I won't need to wear this uniform anymore. Zhang Xing looked up at me in shock. Before he could speak, I stood up, gave him a hug, grabbed my bag from my drawer, and left. Zhang Xing had not expected me to initiate physical contact. He froze in place. The Chen family driver was already waiting at the school gate to take me to the Foreign Languages High School, under the advice, poorly disguised as kind intention, of Chen Yu. Mr. Chen arranged for me to be placed in Chen Yu's experimental class, year 10. In my last life, Chen Yu had fabricated so many rumors about me that before I even started school, I was despised everywhere, the walking spare kidney, who deserved none of the privileges of a noble family. Chen Yu refused to acknowledge me as her older sister. I suffered greatly at that school, isolation, being kicked, false rumors spread about me. I was stupid enough back then to think it was my own fault, so I never dared to tell anyone. But things are different now. I stood at the front of the classroom, smiling, looking out at familiar old faces below. Chen Yu's seat was empty, and the female students surrounding it all eyed me with hostile expressions. I smiled, lowered my head, and sat down in my assigned seat, then felt a dead mouse inside the desk drawer. I lifted the mouse out. The students nearby erupted in malicious laughter. The girl sitting closest to Chen Yu laughed the loudest. I smiled, stood, walked over to that girl, pulled open her collar, and dropped the mouse inside. She immediately began screaming. Students from wealthy or prestigious families fill this school. Even teachers here can't afford to upset any one of them. The teachers had long since retreated into the staff room. Before the girl could retaliate, I moved first. I grabbed her braid, leaned in close, and smiled. You really are Chen Yu's obedient little dog. One word from her and you go running to do her dirty work, she shrieked and reached up to claw my face. I released her braid. Her head snapped down by inertia and slammed loudly onto the desk. The spectators burst out laughing. Not one person stepped forward to help her. After thoroughly dealing with the troublemaker, no one came to pick a fight with me for the next few days. A few days later, Chen Yu returned to school after nursing her wound. She brought people with her and blocked me in the girls' bathroom. When the other female students inside saw Chen Yu leading a group of people barging in, they instinctively stepped back and made way. I was in a stall when I heard the commotion outside. I calmly stood my ground and waited for them to start trouble. Chen Yu commanded her entourage to grab the bathroom mop bucket and tried to dump its filthy contents over the top of the stall door and onto me. In my last life, I had faced this exact situation. Back then, I only endured it silently, let the dirty water pour over my head, choked back my tears, and ran out of the bathroom through the jeering laughter. The Chen family driver refused to drive me home, saying the smell on me would ruin the car. I walked back myself. Waiting at home were Mrs. Chen's scolding and Chin Yu's gleeful mockery. Mrs. Chen said someone had photographed me in that state and posted it online, humiliating the Chen family. During those 3 months in the hospital bed, I thought endlessly about how to escape this bathroom. Now the opportunity had finally come. Taking advantage of the moment they were repositioning the bucket, I stepped back 2 paces. Used the door handle as a foothold, and flipped over the top of the stall. My landing point was perfectly placed, right beside Chin Yu. Chin Yu hadn't even had time to react before I seized her by the hair and shoved her head into the garbage bin that had just been passed forward. The girls watching had never seen Chin Yu struggle like that. They stood rooted to the spot, mouths hanging open. Chin Yu thrashed without stopping. Her sharp nails raked open the skin on my arm. But my grip was like an iron clamp, she couldn't break free. Only when she finally stopped struggling did I lift her head and throw her to the side. Then I turned around as if nothing had happened and looked at all the girls crowded around. What you just witnessed was me disciplining my little sister. Family matters, surely all of you know better than to interfere. The hostility on me was too heavy. The girls looked at each other, then uniformly backed out. I was not at all worried about them reporting this to a teacher. Students from families like the Chens, no matter what they do, teachers won't interfere. Chin Yu's carefully maintained hair had a chunk ripped out by me. I rolled it up and tossed it onto her face, then patiently waited for her to regain consciousness. I had never had patience for my enemies. After 10 minutes with no sign of her waking, I gave her 2 brisk slaps. Very effective, she came around quickly. Under Chin Yu's terrified gaze, I smiled and said, I thought slashing your face would serve as enough of a warning to stop provoking me. I didn't think you'd still be this determined to come dance in front of me. Keep it up, and I won't hesitate. I'll strip you of your heir status first. Chin Yu flinched at the words, heir status. From somewhere she found the strength to break free of my grip and swung a slap at me. I could have dodged, but I heard a familiar sound outside the bathroom. I deliberately took the hit. The hand that had just slapped me. Zhang Sheng burst in right after. Chin Yu saw Zhang Sheng and her expression immediately froze, then shifted into panic. Zhang Sheng, why are you here? Zhang Sheng saw my cheek swelling and the blood on my exposed arm. His sharp gaze cut toward Chin Yu. If I hadn't come, how would I have seen you bullying your own older sister? Chin Yu's eyes, as if laced with venom, shot a venomous glare at me. I lowered my head, and my body unconsciously leaned against Zhang Sheng. Zhang Sheng didn't wait for Chin Yu to explain. He scooped me up into his arms and carried me out of the bathroom. Chin Yu had grown up at the Chen family's side. By the time Zhang Sheng had finished treating my wounds, Mr. Chen had already called. Demanding an explanation, I answered the phone and got the first word in, Dad, I'm currently with Zhang Sheng. The furious voice on the other end went instantly silent. Mr. Chen's tone shifted to gentle concern. Xiao Xiao, you just said there was a small altercation at school. You weren't hurt, were you? I gave a vague reply. It's nothing serious. Zhang Sheng is treating my wound. I'll hang up first. I ended the call. I turned to look at Zhang Sheng, who was applying medicine to my arm. How did you suddenly appear here? Like some kind of hero. He looked down, still applying medicine, and answered, I was afraid someone would bully you, so I came. I thought of the school uniform Chin Yu had ruined at home and understood why he had thought that way. I covered my swollen left cheek with my hand and used my still intact right cheek to smile. Thank you. Zhang Sheng's hair brushed against my right cheek, making me look even more calm and endearing. I had learned this in my last life. The injured side of a face can't inspire sympathy, so present the good side. Zhang Xing frowned and pulled my hand down. Don't touch the wound with dirty hands. You'll get an infection. I was stunned. He said sternly, your left cheek is swollen and ugly. Zhang Xing carefully cleaned my hand and said seriously, it's not ugly. White jade just has a slight blemish. It'll be fine in a few days. White jade. Was I truly white jade? I laughed to myself. When I returned home, Mr. and Mrs. Chen were already sitting at the dining table waiting for me. Seeing me walk in with my backpack, Mr. Chen quickly asked, Xiao Xiao, how did you and Zhang Xing come to be together? I glanced at Qin Yu. She lowered her head and didn't make a sound. I calmly recounted what had happened in the bathroom, leaving out only the part where I had beaten Qin Yu. Mr. Chen showed no concern at all for Qin Yu's injuries. His eyes lit up with excitement. Zhang family in Beijing has quite a name. Zhang Sheng is the only heir of the Zhang family. The fact that you've built a relationship with him, very good, very good. He hurriedly reminded me, when Zhang Sheng was born, our two families jokingly pledged a marriage. Although it was said in jest, you children must hold on to it. This is the ladder that will help our Chen family rise higher. In my last life he had said those very same words. Except then, he had earnestly instructed Qin Yu. Now he was reminding me. Zhang Xing kept his word when he transferred to the Foreign Languages High School. On the Friday before the transfer, under the attentive gaze of a crowd of female students who had chosen me as a seatmate, Zhang Xing handed me a formal invitation to his birthday party. I cheerfully accepted. When I got home, I casually passed the invitation to Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen was of course overjoyed, but Mrs. Chen stood to the side and requested that Qin Yu be taken along. After all, she's never attended events like this before. With you there to guide you, you won't do anything to embarrass the Chen family. Mr. Chen mulled it over and agreed, and I, naturally, put on the face of a good, obedient daughter and submitted to Mr. Chen's arrangement. On Saturday evening, I put on formal wear and rode with Qin Yu in the car to the Zhang residence. Once the soundproofing partition behind the driver went up, Qin Yu let her provocative expression show. You country bumpkin, do you even know how to dance or mingle with people? I glanced at her sideways. Haven't you been beaten enough? Do you want more? She instinctively flinched, then immediately straightened up. I am the noble young mistress who has been raised at the Qin household for 16 years. I am the rightful heir. Whoever Zhang Xing marries, he'll marry someone of my status. You, what exactly are you? To make Zhang Xing notice the two of us, Mr. Chen had gone to great lengths. The formal gowns we wore were the latest season's luxury designs, perfectly tailored to show off our figures, flowing and beautiful and generous. The Zhang residence was worthy of its name as a place of noble refinement. Even by the standards of the Chen family, it was more dignified and elegant. At the party, Mrs. Chen brought Qin Yu and me to meet Mrs. Zhang, a graceful yet gentle woman. When Qin Yu saw Zhang Xing standing tall and composed beside his mother, her face reddened as she greeted him. Zhang Xing kept his word when he transferred to the Foreign Languages High School. On the Friday before the transfer, under the attentive gaze of a crowd of female students who had chosen me as a seatmate, Zhang Xing handed me a formal invitation to his birthday party. I cheerfully accepted. When I got home, I casually passed the invitation to Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen was of course overjoyed, but Mrs. Chen stood to the side and requested that Qin Yu be taken along. After all, she's never attended events like this before. With you there to guide you, you won't do anything to embarrass the Chen family. Mr. Chen mulled it over and agreed, and I, naturally, put on the face of a good, obedient daughter and submitted to Mr. Chen's arrangement. On Saturday evening, I put on formal wear and rode with Qin Yu in the car to the Zhang residence. Once the soundproofing partition behind the driver went up, Qin Yu let her provocative expression show. "You country bumpkin, do you even know how to dance or mingle with people?" I glanced at her sideways. "Haven't you been beaten enough? Do you want more?" She instinctively flinched, then immediately straightened up. "I am the noble young mistress who has been raised at the Qin household for 16 years. I am the rightful heir. Whoever Zhang Xing marries, he'll marry someone of my status. You, what exactly are you?" To make Zhang Xing notice the two of us, Mr. Chen had gone to great lengths. The formal gowns we wore were the latest season's luxury designs, perfectly tailored to show off our figures, flowing and beautiful and generous. The Zhang residence was worthy of its name as a place of noble refinement. Even by the standards of the Chen family, it was more dignified and elegant. At the party, Mrs. Chen brought Qin Yu and me to meet Mrs. Zhang, a graceful yet gentle woman. When Qin Yu saw Zhang Xing standing tall and composed beside his mother, her face reddened as she greeted him. "Zhang Xing, it's been a long time." Zhang Xing didn't even glance at her. "It hasn't been long at all. Didn't we see each other at school the other day?" Qin Yu was struck speechless. I turned away and tried to hold back the smile tugging at my lips. Mrs. Chen looked a little embarrassed and was about to smooth things over, but Mrs. Zhang had already taken my hand. "You must be Xiao Xiao. Our Zhang Xing mentions you often." I accepted the warm gaze and nodded obediently. What a well-mannered girl. I could tell at first glance she has her own mind, Mrs. Zhang said approvingly. "From now on, our Zhang Xing will need to rely on your good care." She then took me by the arm and led me into the heart of the party to introduce me to the other noble ladies. When the birthday banquet began, Zhang Xing invited me to dance the first dance. I glanced over at Qin Yu, who stood to the side grinding her teeth, and happily accepted. "Qin Yu, watch carefully. I intend to steal your fiancé." The birthday celebration lasted nearly 4 hours. Before I left, Mrs. Zhang presented me with a jade bracelet. The bracelet shimmered with beautiful blue-green color. Even the well-traveled Mrs. Chen couldn't tear her eyes away. Qin Yu saw the bracelet on my wrist, forgot all decorum, and turned and walked away. Mrs. Chen kept apologizing to the Zhang family. Mrs. Zhang smiled, waved it off, and pulled me aside to keep chatting. Mr. Chen had already received news from inside the banquet hall and was waiting eagerly at home. When I arrived, he excitedly took my hand and urged me, "You must hold on to Zhang Sheng. Your older brother is gone. The only one who can help the Chen family prosper now is you." As he spoke, the door was kicked open. Qin Yu, hair disheveled, stormed into the living room in a rage. "I am the noble daughter who has grown up in the Chen family. On what basis does this lowly newcomer get more attention than me?" Having said that, she lunged toward me. In Mr. Chen's eyes right now, only the Chen family's wealth and standing mattered. He immediately seized Qin Yu's arm and shoved her aside, furiously saying, "You've lived in the Chen family for 16 years and your only accomplishment is antagonizing the Zhang family boy, who won't give you a second look. You know nothing of the company's business. Do you truly think you deserve to be heir?" Mrs. Chen, who usually rushed to Qin Yu's defense, was berated by Mr. Chen as well. it's all your fault for spoiling her until she's completely out of control. The Chen household descended into chaos. The final result: Chen Yu was taken down to the basement and confined. I moved into Chen Yu's bedroom. The next day at school, I helped Chen Yu think through her long-term plan. When it was my turn to erase the chalkboard, Zhang Xing noticed the jade bracelet still on my wrist and voluntarily stood up to help me. Time passed peacefully. One Friday, the driver suddenly announced he would not be picking me up after school. I had a premonition something was about to happen. I quietly turned on my phone's voice recorder, kept my face neutral, and walked home. Sure enough, in the narrow alley behind the school, a group of thugs blocked my path. Their expressions were lewd as they stared me down. The leader, I recognized him from my past life. He was Chen Yu's boyfriend and the school bully of the foreign languages high school. In my last life, he had embraced Chen Yu in his arms, looked down at me from above, and ordered his followers to tear my clothes. Only because a kind passerby had called the police did I narrowly escape being violated. In this life, he still looked down at me from above. He gave the thugs their instructions. You said to find 2 guys to put her in bed. Don't forget to take pictures and send them to the Zhang family. A thug bent forward and sized me up with a malicious expression. I stared at them like they were idiots, slipped my hand into my pocket, pressed the emergency call button on my phone to alert the police, then casually picked up a bent iron rod off the ground. Before the police get here, all of you can choose to beg for my forgiveness. I might let you off. I had been training in martial arts for over half a year, precisely for moments like this. But before I could make a move, Zhang Xing appeared with several people in tow. His professionally trained bodyguards pinned the thugs to the ground. Then the police arrived right on time and took everyone away. When we were sitting at the police station, I finally came back to myself and asked Zhang Xing, "How did you find me?" "You appeared like a superhero." Zhang Xing frowned, took my hand, and carefully examined it while answering. "Just now, an elderly woman said a girl wearing a green jade bracelet had been cornered by thugs in an alley. I knew right away it was you." Then, seeing no wounds on my palm, he exhaled in relief and told me, "Next time you get into a fight, don't use an iron rod. You'll get tetanus, and that'll be the end of you." I went silent. When the police took my statement, I produced the voice recording on my phone. The school bully Yang Jimin's words were crystal clear. Mr. and Mrs. Chen were urgently summoned. Mr. Chen's face turned white when he heard the recording. He left ahead of us. Mrs. Chen was kept behind to deal with the remaining matters. Zhang Xing contacted his family's legal team to push for a harsher verdict against Yang Jimin and the thugs. On the way home, Mrs. Chen was silent for a long time before finally opening her mouth with difficulty. "Xiao Xiao. Chen Yu is your biological little sister." A mocking smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. I said nothing and let the remark pass. When we got home, Chen Yu was nowhere to be seen. Only Mr. Chen sat on the sofa, his expression dark. I stared at them like they were idiots, slipped my hand into my pocket, pressed the emergency call button on my phone to alert the police, then casually picked up a bent iron rod off the ground. "Before the police get here, all of you can choose to beg for my forgiveness. I might let you off." I had been training in martial arts for over half a year, precisely for moments like this. But before I could make a move, Zhang Xing appeared with several people in tow. His professionally trained bodyguards pinned the thugs to the ground. Then the police arrived right on time and took everyone away. When we were sitting at the police station, I finally came back to myself and asked Zhang Xing, "How did you find me?" You appeared like a superhero. Zhang Xing frowned, took my hand, and carefully examined it while answering. Just now, an elderly woman said a girl wearing a green jade bracelet had been cornered by thugs in an alley. I knew right away it was you. Then, seeing no wounds on my palm, he exhaled in relief and told me, next time you get into a fight, don't use an iron rod. You'll get tetanus, and that'll be the end of you. I went silent. When the police took my statement, I produced the voice recording on my phone. The school bully Yang Jimin's words were crystal clear. Mr. and Mrs. Chen were urgently summoned. Mr. Chen's face turned white when he heard the recording. He left ahead of us. Mrs. Chen was kept behind to deal with the remaining matters. Zhang Xing contacted his family's legal team to push for a harsher verdict against Yang Jimin and the thugs. On the way home, Mrs. Chen was silent for a long time before finally opening her mouth with difficulty. Xiao Xiao. Chen Yu is your biological little sister. A mocking smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. I said nothing and let the remark pass. When we got home, Chen Yu was nowhere to be seen. Only Mr. Chen sat on the sofa, his expression dark. What exactly do you want? Please, I beg you, don't do that. I nodded with satisfaction. I recall you loved making videos documenting your daily life. His expression went rigid. Did my little sister ever star as the leading lady in your videos? This wasn't baseless rumor. In my last life, shortly before my surgery, when Zhang Sheng and Chen Yu were about to become engaged, Yang Jimin suddenly appeared and gave Mr. Chen a 15-second video. Chen Yu in bed with him. Mr. Chen raged at Chen Yu for half a month and eventually paid 30 million to buy back the video. Yang Jimin clenched his teeth and was about to refuse. I added, the Zhang family has already gathered evidence of your family's tax evasion. You now have two choices. First, hand over the video, and I will write you a letter of understanding. You will still be able to go abroad to study. Second, refuse, and wait to go to prison while your family goes bankrupt and begs on the streets. I raised an eyebrow, smiled, and said, think carefully. I'm not comfortable sitting here much longer. I'll be leaving first. I stood up and turned to go. Before I had fully turned around, I heard the sound of urgent tapping behind me. I'll show you the video right now. It's in a USB drive locked in my room. I nodded with satisfaction, turned back around, and smiled. Once I have the video, you can be released. That night, I wore Chen Yu's sleepwear, walked down to the basement, and opened her door. Chen Yu was lying face down on the bed, face swollen from Mr. Chen's beating. I turned on the light and patiently waited for her to wake up. Chen Yu was awakened by the light. She saw me sitting by her side, cackling, and frightened herself into backing away against the wall. I stroked Chen Yu's long, silky hair and said softly, Chen Yu, today in your boyfriend's phone, I found something very interesting. Would you like to see it? Chen Yu seemed to recall something. Her eyes went wide, and in them was the faint terror of prey that has been caught. I opened my phone and played the video I had prepared. An ugly image appeared on screen, Chen Yu's face, red and contorted. Chen Yu reached out to snatch the phone, but I blocked her. You probably never imagined that the two of you were being filmed, did you? Tell me, if I send this to the media, how quickly do you think your father will discard you? Chen Yu's expression turned to despair, like a beautiful rose about to wither. I stood up, and finally set a bottle of medicine down on the bedside table. I turned and left. Before going, I glanced back and smiled. From today on, I will take your place, step by step, as Zhang Xing's fiancé and as the one who holds power in the Chen family. I stepped over Chinyu's desperate sobbing and went upstairs to rest, my heart content. The next morning, when the Chin family nanny brought breakfast to Chinyu, she found Chinyu had slashed her wrists. Fortunately, she was found in time and her life was saved. Chinyu was brought back from the edge, but her mind had shattered. Beyond the video filmed by Yang Jimin, the contribution of the medicine bottle I had placed there could not be overlooked. It was the medicine Chin Xian had been taking before his death, prescribed to reduce organ rejection after a transplant. Chinyu had secretly swapped it out for an addictive substance with an identical appearance. After taking it, Chin Xian's nervous system was numbed, and he underestimated the severity of the kidney rejection. If Mr. and Mrs. Chin ever found out the truth, would they still protect Chinyu? After this battle, the only candidate for Chin family heir was me. I stepped into Chinyu's place and became the center of noble society. Countless noble daughters who had previously looked down on me now rushed to extend olive branches. I accepted them all and worked to dissolve the old tensions between us. My relationship with Zhang Xin grew better and better. On weekend afternoons, I was practically a regular guest at the Zhang residence, attending events with Mrs. Zhang. Mr. Chen grew increasingly satisfied with me and gradually allowed me to sit in on company decisions. Between the lines, he treated me as heir apparent, but never mentioned Chinyu again, not even once. In year 11, Chinyu's mental state deteriorated further. She began experiencing hallucinations. I accompanied Mrs. Chen to the psychiatric hospital to visit Chinyu. The moment Chinyu saw me, her eyes went mad. I dismissed the nurses from the room first, then stood behind Mrs. Chen, smiling, and watched. Mrs. Chen ached with grief and drew Chinyu into her arms, then heard Chinyu muttering, "Big brother, it wasn't me. It wasn't me who killed him." Mrs. Chen's expression froze. She looked down at Chinyu, whose mind was fractured and unstable. In the depths of Chinyu's eyes, something broke apart. Big brother came looking for trouble himself. He was already that sick and still wanted my kidney. He deserved to die. In an instant, Mrs. Chen understood everything. She shoved Chinyu away. All maternal warmth evaporated. Her eyes turned ice cold as she stared down at Chinyu. "Chinyu, what were you just saying?" Chinyu was knocked to the floor. She suddenly collapsed and screamed. "On what basis are any of you doing this? On what basis can Chin Xian be the heir? On what basis does some nobody who crawled in from nowhere get to stand above me? I want every single one of you to die." Then she threw herself face down on the floor and wept. I walked to Mrs. Chen's side and asked her, "Mother, should we still bring my little sister home in this state?" Mrs. Chen's expression didn't change at all as she looked at Chinyu weeping and prostrate on the cold floor. Coldly, she said, "No need. Let her spend the rest of her life recuperating here." I nodded and supported Mrs. Chen out of the room. Before I left, I glanced back at Chinyu, the person who had been utterly unmatchable in my last life, like a demon to me, now seemed like nothing at all. Chinyu's actions were not exactly a secret. It was simply that the Chin family had trusted their daughter too completely, so Chin Xian's true cause of death had never been traced back to her. Mr. Chin didn't need much effort to uncover the real truth behind Chin Xian's death. This time, without Mrs. Chin to shelter her, Chinyu's second half of life would surely be filled with suffering. When I graduated from high school, I achieved top scores in the city's university entrance exams and enrolled in the finance department of Beijing University. The Chin family organized a grand coming-of-age ceremony for me. At the ceremony, Mr. Chin gifted me 30% of the company's shares. I accepted with delight. Mr. Chen's health was also gradually declining under the strain of high-intensity work, and he began slowly transferring management responsibilities to me. After the coming-of-age ceremony, in front of Mrs. Zhang, I invited Zhang Xing out for coffee in the flower room. Mrs. Zhang's eyes were warm and gentle as she patted Zhang Xing on the back. "Go on. Remember to take good care of Xiao Xiao." Zhang Xing's ears turned red, but he still followed my footsteps. The flower room was the only place in the Qin residence without surveillance cameras, perfectly suited for confidential discussions. I sat down and got straight to the point. "I want you to help me destroy my father. Here is the evidence I've gathered. I need you to clear the path. We have to make him go to prison for life." Zhang Xing had expected me to discuss something light and romantic. He hadn't imagined I would bring this to him. He didn't ask me why. He agreed to my request without hesitation. I was slightly surprised. "You're not going to ask why?" Zhang Xing shook his head. "You do everything with careful consideration. You certainly have your reasons." I nodded and discussed the details with him for a while, then returned to the coming-of-age ceremony. Half a month after the ceremony ended, an anonymous tip was filed against Mr. Chen for trafficking in human organs. The evidence submitted was the autopsy report from Bai Chun's body. The report showed Bai Chun's body was missing a kidney, and psychological testing conducted by the school showed her mental state had been completely normal, no depressive tendencies whatsoever. The moment the news broke, the Qin family's stock price surged and plunged violently. Simultaneously, a marketing contact leaked insider information. The Qin Corporation had been evading taxes. In an instant, Qin Corp was assailed by thousands of accusations, facing a catastrophic crisis. Mr. Chen feared the scandal would bring the Qin family crashing down. He made the decisive move to transfer all his shares to me, intending to sever Qin Corp's ties with him on paper, a move that suited me perfectly. 51% of the shares was enough for me to take complete control of Qin Corporation. I seized the opportunity of this crisis to overhaul the entire senior leadership. All of Mr. Chen's loyal followers were sent off with the toast to retirement tactic. After dismissing the stubborn old guard, fresh blood was poured into Qin Corp, a management team loyal and devoted to me. Mr. Chen had become a complete outsider. By the time he realized what had happened, the sky had already changed. The surgery had been performed at the Qin family's own private hospital, so gathering all the evidence was easy. Public opinion grew too fierce. With Zhang Xing clearing the path, the speed at which Mr. Chen was arrested and convicted was remarkable. When I went to the detention center to visit Mr. Chen, he was still deluding himself that I would get him out. I smiled and said to him, "Father, do you know who it was that retrieved Bai Chun's autopsy report and delivered it to the so-called righteous hero?" Mr. Chen was old but still mentally sharp. He understood immediately that I had been the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. His face contorted. "So it was you, you little mongrel. I never treated you poorly." I looked at his aged face and laughed coldly. If Bai Chun had not taken my place and gone to the Qin family, then the one who died on that operating table would have been me. Mr. Chen looked as if he wanted to say more, but visiting hours were over. The guard took hold of Mr. Chen's arm and led him away. Mr. Chen kept struggling. Through the glass partition, he glared at me with hatred. I smiled and waved at him. The battle-hardened lawyer beside me, expression unchanged, asked, "Miss Gu, I will handle Qin CEO's case. What outcome would you like?" I smiled at him. "Thank you for your efforts, Lawyer Zhang. Once the case is concluded, your legal fees will satisfy you." Lawyer Zhang nodded. exchanged a knowing glance with me, and said nothing more. When I returned home, Mrs. Chen had endured to her limit. Her red-rimmed eyes were filled with desperate hope as she looked at me. "Xiao Xiao, your father won't be in any trouble, will he?" I removed my coat and smiled. "Father deliberately sent someone to harvest organs. He'll most likely be sentenced to death." Mrs. Chen heard this and her eyes rolled back. She fainted. I had no patience to wait for her to come around, so I exchanged a glance with the family doctor standing nearby. The doctor stepped forward and pressed firmly on Mrs. Chen's philtrum until she regained consciousness. I crossed my legs and smiled at her. "Mother, because you were so worried about Father's fate that you fell ill, your health isn't good enough to stay here any longer. You should go to the Nanshan Care Home to recuperate." The Nanshan Care Home specialized in caring for individuals with psychological disorders triggered by severe emotional shock. Mrs. Chen heard this and let out a piercing shriek. "Gu Xiao Xiao, you mongrel, I'm not sick. I don't have any illness." I snapped my fingers. The staff waiting outside broke down the door, helped her into a car, and drove her to the care home. In my last life, after the surgery, I contracted an infection. I lay in agony begging Mrs. Chen to have me treated. She wanted me to die as quickly as possible, a convenient way to eliminate the witness who knew their secret about stealing my kidney. She refused to allow any treatment and let me die without care. Now let her spend the rest of her days in the care home, atoning for what she had done in that past life. 2 months later, Mr. Chen's verdict was handed down for harvesting organs from a minor under the age of 18, causing death, intentional homicide. Death penalty. The hatred from my past life dissolved on the day the verdict took effect. In this second life, I had saved my own life, taken revenge on my enemies, and held the Chen corp in the palm of my hand. This life had been worth living. The Chen family was large, and now only I remained. Mrs. Zhang, fearing I would be lonely, urged Zhang Xing to become engaged with me and have me move into the Zhang residence. Zhang Sheng and I had also come to feel the same way about each other. With the current of the river pushing the boat along, the engagement was natural. At the engagement banquet, Zhang Xing smiled like a lottery winner, holding my hand and refusing to let go. Mrs. Zhang generously gifted me 5% of the Zhang family's shares. What had once chased me would now be left behind. The road ahead would surely be bright and glorious. I, too, was walking toward a better future. Epilogue. Zhang Xing's story. The first time I met her was at the orphanage where she lived. My mother had gone to handle a charity event, exchanging paperwork and donations with the orphanage director. I, still young at the time, was left out on the orphanage lawn to bask in the sun. She was surrounded by a group of children. The one leading them was round and chubby, the exact opposite of her slender frame. I could see she was about to be bullied. I stepped in and drove the whole group away. She timidly thanked me, her eyes drooping at the corners, as adorable as a little rabbit. I noticed the name tag on her chest, Gu Xiao Xiao. The next time I saw her was at the start of high school. The homeroom teacher had asked me to help sort through the student records. Among them, one student stood out the most, a girl with no father and no mother. An orphan. My heart stirred. I looked up her name. Sure enough, it was her. I requested the homeroom teacher to seat me beside her. The teacher agreed cheerfully. More than a decade had passed. She had grown up. Even her eyes had changed. The fragile, vulnerable look I had seen in them before was now replaced by a bright, clear gleam. She had clearly forgotten me, She simply gave me a polite greeting and pulled out her textbook to study. Knowing that her natural science scores weren't strong, I tutored her after school every day. She progressed remarkably quickly, climbing to second place in the class. Our conversations gradually shifted from dry academics to topics about everyday life. Occasionally, I would ask her why she never smiled. Her answer genuinely surprised me. She said she was afraid that if she smiled too much, she would forget the pain she had endured in the past, and that smiling would kill her resolve. I was confused. We were only 16. How could anyone have accumulated so much suffering? I tried asking her out. I spent some time carefully getting dressed for it, and then saw her step off a bus in her school uniform, backpack on her back, expression serene. I'm an orphan. I have no money to buy clothes. I didn't know quite what to do, but fortunately, she didn't seem to care about things like that. She just lowered her head and worked through exam papers with me. At the end of the first semester of year 10, news came from the Chen family. The young mistress they had brought home from the orphanage had died. A suicide, they said. I didn't believe that. The Chens had poor character. The girl's death almost certainly held hidden circumstances. But it wasn't my concern. The next day, I still invited her out. She wore a wine-red dress. Just sitting there, she was as beautiful as a painting. I didn't dare look at her directly. I asked why she had dressed up so nicely. For the first time, she smiled at me, a small, sweet curve of the lips, and said today was her birthday. The orphanage certainly wouldn't have bought her a birthday cake. I went and bought her one. When I got home, my mother saw that I was in high spirits and teased me, asking if I had been out with someone I liked. I flushed red and said nothing. No one knows a child like their mother. She immediately knew I had someone in mind. After a full week of interrogation, I finally admitted it was my new seatmate, Gu Xiaoxiao. At the end of term parent meeting, my mother sat in my seat. She didn't see the girl, but she did see a thick stack of award certificates and an exam paper that scored nearly full marks. When she returned home, she immediately questioned me about why such an outstanding girl had no parent coming to the meeting for her. I told her she was an orphan. My mother went quiet for a long time, then said with heartache, "Poor child. Heaven is truly unfair." During winter break, my mother returned from a banquet and mentioned that the Chen family had found their true noble daughter who had been lost outside. Her name was Gu Xiaoxiao. She also said that although the girl had grown up in an orphanage, her bearing and poise were far more elegant and dignified than the so-called noble daughter, who had lived in the Chen family for more than a decade. I grew a little worried. Chen Yu was notorious for her arrogance and willfulness. Would Xiaoxiao be able to handle her? Sure enough, Chen Yu bullied her on the very first day of school. When I saw her wearing an oversized, outdated school uniform that clearly wasn't hers, I knew something had happened. She said the uniform was Chen Xian's, and her own clothes had been ruined by Chen Yu. Even so, I could see the milk stains that hadn't fully dried on the uniform, Chen Yu's doing. I gave her a change of clothes. As a result, she touched my hand, hugged me, and then said she was transferring schools. I was a little anxious. She was transferring to Chen Yu's school. Wasn't that walking straight into the tiger's den? I had to go and protect her. 2 weeks later, I completed my enrollment procedures. When the teacher led me to the classroom, a group of female students was huddled together in spirited discussion, saying Gu Xiaoxiao was done for, that Chen Yu had cornered her in the bathroom, that even if she didn't die she would be demoted a grade. I bolted to the bathroom. Sure enough, Chinyu was there beating her. I had arrived too late. I carried Xiao Xiao out of the bathroom and treated her wounds in the nurse's office. While I was doing that, Mr. Chen barged in looking for trouble. I watched her pull me forward to deflect the danger, and inside I silently laughed. Very soon, my birthday arrived. I sent her an invitation. She dressed brilliantly for the occasion and was pulled this way and that by my mother, who was clearly very pleased with her. My mother even gave her the jade bracelet that had been passed down in our family. Xiao Xiao and I danced the first dance together. It was the first time I had held a girl's hand. Her hand was soft and delicate. She was also a little shy. She lowered her eyes and wouldn't look at me directly. My hand at her waist didn't dare move, but I felt warmth settle through me, like warmth rising from precious jade. After the birthday banquet, the relationship between us moved to a new level. My mother even went so far as to pinch her nose and look for Mrs. Chen to learn more about Xiao Xiao. Mrs. Chen responded by saying Xiao Xiao was inferior to Chinyu. My mother came back rolling her eyes and said Mrs. Chen was talking nonsense. That Friday, because I was on duty, I stayed late after school. I noticed the Chen family driver standing outside the school gate looking anxious. I went up and asked. The driver said he'd lost his phone and couldn't reach Gu Xiao Xiao, and asked if she was still at school. My heart dropped. Had something happened? Sure enough. This time, I arrived just in time and rescued Xiao Xiao, who had been cornered in an alley. At the police station, I swore I would ruin everyone who had gone after her. Then Mrs. Chen barged in and tried to cover it up. The matter involved Chinyu, so Mrs. Chen was caught in the middle. Mr. Chen, seeing our hands clasped together, knew which way to lean, and I gave Xiao Xiao the evidence of Yang Jimin's family's tax evasion for her to handle herself. After that, she became a regular at my home. My mother liked her mature, sharp nature and noticed how much she disliked the Chen family. She made excuses every day to keep Xiao Xiao at our house, treating her like her own daughter. At the coming-of-age ceremony, she got straight to the point and told me she wanted Mr. Chen behind bars. She also told me the show of vulnerability had been an act. The death of Bai Chun had been connected to her. She had set a trap to draw Chinyu into bullying her, and then used my feelings for her to completely eliminate Chinyu. If you feel disgusted by me, break things off with me. You're so kind and good. Someone like me doesn't deserve you. Her expression was ice cold as she said it. But her hands, hanging at her sides, trembled faintly. I sighed. I opened her clenched fist. I don't just know everything you've done. I've known all along that you planned our meeting at the high school, that you deliberately approached me and used me as a lever to catch the Chen family. But, darling, I consented to every bit of it. I gave her a helpless look and stroked her hand. The Zhang family's private detectives don't spare anyone. From the very first day you sat beside me, I already knew your purpose in approaching me. When the detective handed me everything about her, I was in great pain, but I didn't want to stop her from doing what she wanted to do. Having not suffered as others have suffered, don't lecture others about goodness. I only needed to keep her safe, then stand at the end and wait for her. That was enough. She listened to my explanation for a long time without coming back to herself. Finally, she threw herself into my arms and held on tightly, like a proud little cat letting down its guard. Then she frankly told my mother everything. My mother, rather than being furious at the deception, instead pulled Xiao Xiao into her chest and wept aloud. You poor child. You've been wronged so much. Xiao Xiao and I frantically tried to comfort her. Eventually, my mother waved her hand and declared, "From now on, Xiao Xiao is my own daughter. My own daughter has been bullied. The Zhang family will never let it go." On the first day the verdict was carried out, Xiao Xiao lay sprawled across my body, stretched out like a little cat, sleeping deeply and soundly, the first truly peaceful sleep in over a decade. The story ends beautifully and warmly. The girl I have liked for over a decade, wearing the engagement ring I gave her, lives happily with me. Epilogue: Life after the wedding. After settling affairs with the Qin family, Xiao Xiao and I became engaged at my mother's urging. More than half of Beijing's noble families attended our wedding. The majority came to offer blessings, but there were also those with no sense who approached me asking about the whereabouts of Mrs. Chen and Qin Yu. Before I could open my mouth, my mother stepped forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and, in 2 or 3 sentences, drove them away. At a noble family banquet like this, gifts and wedding presents are indispensable. In the warm banquet before the formal ceremony, Xiao Xiao and I hosted guests together. We had just seen off one congratulating couple when I suddenly heard 2 girls in red formal wear speaking in what they thought were low voices, saying, "Xiao Xiao wouldn't really think she's found true love, would she? The Qin family now only has her as its backbone. If she marries into the Zhang family, all of the Qin family's assets will belong to the Zhangs." Exactly, look at someone of her humble origins. She clearly has no idea she's being taken advantage of. She's helping someone else count their money and doesn't even know it. The hand I was using to pour wine paused. I met Zhang Xing's eyes. Zhang Xing frowned and was about to step forward when I grabbed his arm. The 2 girls chatting in the corner startled and turned around, right into us. They were so frightened they fled. Zhang Xing looked at me, puzzled. I kept my expression neutral and picked up a glass of red wine. The girl who was directly across from me on my first day at the foreign languages high school, she was the one who put a dead mouse in my desk. I paused. The girl who faced me at school, her father, a senior company manager, embezzled 30 million from me and is already in prison. The implication was, they've already suffered enough. There's no need to take revenge anymore. Zhang Xing burst out laughing and pulled me along to find my mother. The engagement banquet began. I had no family of my own. Mrs. Zhang resolutely stood at my side, holding a long gift list, reading out each item one by one. At the end, the 5% of Zhang family shares gifted outright drew murmurs of amazement from everyone present. As for my dowry, I had only a cat named Grill Baby, which I had picked up in the Zhang family garden. After the marriage contract was signed, Father Zhang, in front of all of Beijing's noble society, declared, "The Zhang family has never coveted a wife's dowry. Our Xiao Xiao is the Zhang family's daughter-in-law. We are bringing her in with a full formal ceremony and 8 great palanquins. From this day forward, Xiao Xiao is a member of the Zhang family. As long as the Zhang family exists, no one will lay a single finger on Xiao Xiao." These were not empty words. After Mrs. Chen entered the care home, she harbored a bone-deep hatred for me and encouraged several of her relatives to come sabotage my business. A few days prior, a thug barely past the age of majority had been hired to come after me with a knife. He ended up kicked flying. Both the man and the knife went tumbling to the ground. But at today's engagement banquet, surely no one would come to cause trouble. The Zhang family, after all, was the number 1 or 2 most prestigious family in Beijing. no one would be eager to put their head on the chopping block. After the engagement banquet ended, Zhang Sheng and I returned to the Zhang residence together. My mother-in-law had already had all of my belongings tidied and settled. My room was right next to Zhang Sheng's bedroom. Grill Baby saw me come home and gave a meow, then hugged my leg and jumped into my arms. I held her, the orange tabby's soft body pressed warmly against mine, and suddenly remembered, in the orphanage, a well-dressed little boy had squatted down beside me and used his handkerchief to clean the dirt from a wound on my leg. Nearby had been a small cat who, despite being injured, had pressed close against my body. I raised my head. The child's face from my memory slowly merged with the face of Zhang Sheng standing beside me now. I heard my own voice. Zhang Sheng, did we meet once a very long time ago, when we were little? Zhang Sheng seemed to have long anticipated this question. He smiled and looked at me. You finally remembered. Back then, I had still been small. Because of my good grades, Bai Chun had crushed and bullied me. In those days, my heart was both kind and weak. Bullied, I didn't dare say a word. I could only press my hand over my wounds and weep in silence. Fortunately, I had a small cat to keep me company. It had been born from a stray cat nearby, but because it was too sickly and frail, the mother cat had abandoned it. I felt we were kindred spirits, so I secretly kept it hidden in the orphanage. One day, I watched Bai Chun and her attendants catch several other small cats, cruelly pouring pepper water into the kitten's eyes, and then laughing out loud as I silently curled into a corner, trembling, terrified they would discover my little Tangerine. I had broken the cup that was Bai Chun's favorite. She had the director throw my blanket and bedding up to the attic. From then on, little Tangerine and I lived together in the attic, dependent on each other for survival, but the price was that Bai Chun's bullying grew worse and worse. She brought all the other children in the orphanage to isolate me. The repeated bullying nearly broke me, and the urge to end my own life was pushed to its peak when they turned their cruelty on little Tangerine. At that moment, a handsome young boy appeared out of nowhere, drove away Bai Chun and her attendants, and used his handkerchief to clean the wounds on my knees. He sat down and talked with me. He listened to me pour out my heart. When he heard me say I wanted to die, he immediately tried to persuade me. I know you're in great pain from being bullied. But the best revenge isn't to end your own life. It's to live better than them and make them envious. He looked at my blank expression and sighed, reached out with his small hand, and gently rubbed the bruise on my forehead. He pulled me up from the grass. From far away, the director called out to him, addressing him as young master. He hesitated a moment and called back an acknowledgement. I saw him about to hurry away and desperately grabbed onto him. Can you help me find a home for little Tangerine, so she won't be beaten because of me? Without a moment's hesitation, he nodded, cradled little Tangerine, who was busy grooming herself, against his chest, and said to me, then you have to make me a promise. No matter what, you will absolutely survive. You will get out of here. Tears swam in my eyes. I gave a firm nod. He pinched my hand gently, then, holding little Tangerine, ran off. After a short period, my life grew calm again. Bai Chun still looked at me with disdain, but as I grew older, my heart was no longer as fragile as before. I kept the promise I had made to that boy and survived with all my strength. Little Tangerine would occasionally climb over the orphanage walls to come and play with me. She had been entrusted by that boy to the family that lived next to the orphanage. Apparently her room and board was well covered. Little Tangerine was cared for wonderfully. Through countless days and nights without a glimmer of hope, little Tangerine's wagging tail and the boy's clear, bright voice were always there to carry me forward. My eyes reddened. I sniffled. My voice carried a faint sob. Why didn't you tell me sooner? You had to make me wait this long. Zhangxing put his arm around my waist and patted me gently, as if patting a child. You were deeply scheming and waiting to take revenge. I couldn't let something as trivial as a love affair slow you down, could I? I was tickled by all his patting and made a show of wanting to hit him back. He caught my fist and held it in his palm. Grill Baby is little Tangerine's granddaughter. Her owner said she was too scrawny and small and needed extra care, so I brought her home. Originally I was going to officially give her to you, but who knew Grill Baby would be so mischievous? The moment I turned around, she had already escaped. I thought of Grill Baby bouncing up and down in the garden and let out a smile. Grill Baby back then shredded 3 of my outfits. What do you mean she's scrawny and small? Her owner thought she was too naughty and so passed her on to me. Zhangxing, you big fool. The warm summer afternoon was gentle and comfortable. Grill Baby lay sprawled across my body. I leaned back against Zhangxing, one person and one cat simultaneously stretching and settling into a comfortable position, beginning to drift off to sleep. There is no winter that cannot be survived. There is no spring that will not arrive. Now, I am walking toward my spring. Epilogue. Life goes on. After that, Zhangxing and I enrolled at Beijing University. To make it easier to manage the company in the future, both of us chose business administration as our major. My female dormitory roommate's name was Gu Ranran. I knew she was the daughter of the Gu family from Haicheng, a business prodigy in her own right. At just 18 years old, she had already established a firm foothold in the Gu Corporation. Our interests were very similar, and our personalities were compatible, so we quickly became good friends. Ranran and I went everywhere together. Naturally, this left little time for me to be alone with Zhangxing. Even so, there was still someone who admired us both every day. That was Zhangxing's roommate, the Lin family's eldest young master, Lin Mo. If Zhangxing was my fiancé, then Lin Mo was the silent, too scared to confess pursuer of Gu Ranran. When the 4 of us went out together, Zhangxing and I walked ahead, close and warm. Lin Mo and Gu Ranran walked behind. Aside from silence, there was nothing but silence. The 2 of them couldn't even hold hands, vowing to carry their pure love to the very end. Life at Beijing University was most hectic in the middle and final weeks of each semester. Ranran and I were so busy we forgot to eat. On the day before a field trip, both of us ended up in the infirmary with stomach problems. Zhangxing was angry and tapped me on the forehead, scolding me at length. I resorted to the grand technique of clinging and acting like a baby to make him cool down. By contrast, Lin Mo beside us was serving Ranran hand and foot like a little bride. In the end, he cast a resentful glance at me playing and laughing with Zhangxing, wanting to say something to Ranran but holding back. Ranran kept her expression calm and drank her water and took her medicine. Zhangxing and I exchanged a meaningful glance and smiled quietly. Lin Mo, that fool, Ranran had been waiting for him to confess until the flowers had wilted. And here he was, still looking around indecisively, not daring to say a single word. At the end of the first semester of freshman year, someone from the care home sent me a message saying Mrs. Chen had been causing chaos inside the facility, threatening to kill herself. She had tried to jump off a balcony but was dragged back by her ankles by a passerby. Her right foot was dislocated. I gave a cold laugh and replied, "Let her cause a scene. Next time she jumps, don't bother stopping her. after sending that reply, I pushed open the dormitory door and heard Gu Ranran standing on the balcony, coldly speaking into the phone. "Keep causing a scene all you like. If you can't stay peacefully at the psychiatric facility, then don't blame me for going after your biological mother's family." I started to stay quiet, but in the end decided to speak up. "Ranran, if you need my help with anything, I can share the burden with you." She rubbed the space between her brows and was quiet for a long moment before finally opening her mouth. I listened to her story, a story of desperate darkness, of fighting tooth and nail to survive after an earthquake. The earthquake had claimed her grandmother's life. Her aunt had joined the search and rescue team as a volunteer, searching through the rubble for 5 days and 5 nights, and in the end, still could not find any trace of her. For revenge, I turned myself into the noble daughter of the Gu family. The Gu family killed the people I loved. I brought them to ruin. That is only right and just. Her eyes turned ruthless, but in the end, they were drained of strength. She leaned against the wall, exhausted. "Telling you this much negative energy. I hope you don't despise me for it." I shook my head, stepped forward, and hugged her. "Ranran is Ranran, the best Ranran in the world. A person who is both strong and independent. How could I ever despise you?" She was completely stunned. Then, beneath my embrace, she stiffly wrapped her arms around me. That night, I held her hand and told her my own story. The two of us laughed and joked together, competing to see who had suffered more. In the end, the conclusion we reached, it seemed Gu Ranran was a little more wretched. At least I still had Zhangsheng. Poor Ranran had that blockhead Lin Mo, who still to this day didn't dare confess. Fortunately, the incident of the student council president confessing publicly in front of everyone had finally taught Lin Mo a forceful lesson. Zhang Sheng and I watched from the crowd as Lin Mo pulled Gu Ranran into a car, and then looked at each other and smiled. Those two had finally gotten together. Epilogue. Small details. About the jade bracelet. The bracelet had been given by Mrs. Zhang. Because she said it was a family heirloom when she presented it, Xiao Xiao treasured it greatly. Normally she kept it locked away and only took it out to wear on special occasions, except for the time she wore it during high school when she, not fully understanding things yet, got into a fight with a classmate. After that incident, she left it in the safe every time. Until Grill Baby climbed to the top of the wardrobe and knocked down the box sitting up there, Zhangxing finally remembered it even existed. Xiao Xiao was absolutely heartbroken. Zhangxing groggily retrieved a whole series of identical bracelets from the safe. Father said mother was lively and spirited when she was young and couldn't make up her mind. She just bought a whole batch of bracelets and declared them all family heirlooms. "They're all ours now." Xiao Xiao was struck speechless by the Zhang family's extravagance. Then she put on all the bracelets and bounced up and down, parading around to show Zhangsheng. Grill Baby, dripping in gold and silver beside her, struggled laboriously to trail behind Xiao Xiao. At the time, Zhangsheng was on the phone with his assistant. He turned around to find 2 glittering balls of light, one large, one small, standing in blazing glory in the middle of his study. For a split second he thought he'd wandered into an old-school disco. But then again, the kind of person who could make someone as calm and self-controlled as him willingly shed any pretense was none other than Xiao Xiao. So let her be a little mischievous, it was perfectly fine. About Grill Baby. Grill Baby was a lively little creature at home. From the very beginning she was a tiny tyrant, with an enormous appetite. All by herself, she could drain half the mother cat's milk. Growing a little bigger, She began climbing flowers and breaking branches. She even dared to dig through the grandmother cat's nest. Her owner finally couldn't endure it anymore. Just when a new owner came to visit, the owner decisively, with wailing and crying and fake threats, finally managed to see Grill Baby out the door. When Grill Baby arrived at the Zhang residence, she found her own kind, a beautiful, two-legged female creature. The two-legged creature had behavioral traits exactly like hers. Both were sharp-tongued, loved going out at night, used body rubbing to mark their territory, and would act spoiled with their caretaker for no reason at all. Grill Baby felt very at ease. So together with her kindred spirit, she stayed in the house, made mischief, and when things went wrong, she could just nuzzle and act cute to get back in the caretaker's good graces. Snuggle into a warm lap, and receive food. About the wedding gifts, the Zhang family was very fond of Xiao Xiao, so the gifts they gave her were staggeringly generous. Moreover, Mrs. Zhang was a devoted jewelry addict who had accumulated mountains of jewels over the years. She finally found the opportunity to bring them out and gave every last piece to her daughter-in-law. Xiao Xiao had a day when her enthusiasm ran high and she put on every single piece of jewelry at once, jingling and glittering as she paraded back and forth to show Zhangsheng. Grill Baby beside her, equally decked out in gold and silver, made valiant efforts to follow along. At the time, Zhangsheng was on the phone with his assistant. He turned around, and saw two dazzling balls of light, one large and one small, standing in blazing glory in the middle of his study. For a split second he thought he had stumbled into an old-fashioned disco. But then, the kind of person who could make someone as self-controlled as him willingly set down all pretense, that was none other than Xiao Xiao. So let her play a little. It was just fine. The end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Love Stories with Lisa for more stories. Thank you so much.